These are the headlines we're following at this hour. Following his summit with Putin, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is making a few more stops at Russia's key military sites, visiting a fighter jet plant today. His last stop is expected to be the Russian Pacific Fleet to observe Moscow's naval capabilities amid speculation over their joint military exercises. President Yoon will be heading to New York for the UN General Assembly next week. He will hold a series of bilateral meetings to promote Busan's bid to host the World Expo in 2030. A message on North Korea and Russia is also expected in his UN speech. Over in eastern Libya, the death toll from the devastating flooding has risen to over 11,000. The rival governments are seeking cooperation for humanitarian relief as help is pouring in from the international community. Good afternoon. After his summit with Vladimir Putin, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un got back on his train to visit some of Russia's key military sites before he returns home. Among them was an aircraft factory earlier this morning, which will likely be followed by a visit to the Russian Pacific Fleet. There, Kim is expected to observe Moscow's naval capabilities amid speculation over their joint military exercises. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Arirang has our top story.
A private train that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has been using arrived in the city of Khabarovsk at around 8:50 a.m. on Friday. That's according to Russia's TASS news agency. Kim reportedly looked around a high-tech aircraft production plant in Khabarovsk, which mainly produces the Sukhoi Su-57 high-tech multi-purpose fighter jet as well as private jets. It seems that the North Korean leader will also visit a local shipyard to look at attack submarines and warship building facilities. His last stop in Russia is expected to be Vladivostok. There he will likely tour the Russian Pacific Fleet, where he might actually go on a warship and watch a military exercise. Kim will then head back to North Korea. The U.S. Department of Defense meanwhile said that the South Korea-U.S. joint military drills won't be affected by the possible North Korea-Russia military exercises. Asked about the intention of potential Pyongyang-Moscow drills, Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said on Thursday that although the intention is unknown, it cannot stop any military ties between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. She also warned North Korea of supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Providing any type of arms to Russia would again violate the UN Security Council resolutions that Russia itself voted for. So we would encourage that North Korea, not pursue a deal with Russia.
The South Korean government also said that any actions by North Korea and Russia that violate UN Security Council resolutions and threaten South Korea's security will come at a clear cost. The National Security Council committee members on Thursday called on Moscow and Pyongyang to not get involved in an arms trade. Kim and Putin could possibly meet again soon, as the Kremlin on Thursday said that the Russian leader accepted Kim's invitation to visit the North with pleasure. The Kremlin spokesperson added that every bilateral agreement will be made through diplomatic channels. It also said that the two leaders exchanged rifles during their summit on Wednesday. Lee-Hyun, Arirang News.
The U.S. has issued a fresh round of sanctions against some 150 entities linked to helping Russia evade sanctions and supporting Moscow in its war against Ukraine. Being one of the largest issued by Washington, the sanctions package targets countries including Washington's allies, including Turkey. Lee Seung-jae has more.
In what is one of the largest sanctions packages announced by the U.S. State and Treasury Departments, Washington on Thursday issued a fresh round of sanctions against over 150 entities involved with helping Russia evade sanctions and supporting Moscow in its war against Ukraine. Those involved with helping Russia include businesses and people in Turkey, Georgia, the UAE, Russia, and more. According to Reuters, the latest designations target shipping and trade companies involved in helping repair sanctioned vessels linked to Russia's defense ministry, while also helping with the transfer of dual-use goods, items which have both civilian and military application. It also targets those that sell Western technology to Moscow that could be used to fuel its war in Ukraine. However, watchers have raised concerns over the fact that some of the entities targeted in Washington's latest sanctions package are from Turkey. The U.S. imposed sanctions on 5 Turkish companies and 1 Turkish national linked with helping Russia evade sanctions and supporting Moscow in its war in Ukraine. However, the U.S. State Department says it's not worried that measures taken against Turkish firms will derail Sweden's NATO bid.
We have a constructive, warm relationship with the Turkish government. They are an important ally of ours, and we don't see that in any way these sanctions should have any impact at all on that accession.
Also, among those sanctioned by the U.S. on Thursday is Russia's largest vehicle manufacturer, Autovaz, and a major local copper producer, the Russian Copper Company. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
High-level officials from South Korea and the U.S. are meeting today in Seoul to discuss various diplomatic and military issues to strengthen the alliance. In the meeting of the Extended Deterrence Strategy and Consultation Group, the officials will discuss policy and strategic cooperation between the two countries amid North Korea's escalating nuclear and missile threats. South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister Chang Ho-jin and Vice Defense Minister Shin Bum-chul will meet their American counterparts Under Secretary of State for Arms Control and International Security Bonnie Jenkins and Acting Under Secretary of Defense for Policy Sasha Baker. The meeting comes right after Kim Jong-un met with Russian President on Wednesday. President Yoon will be heading to New York for the UN General Assembly next week. He will hold a series of bilateral meetings to promote Busan's bid to host the World Expo in 2030. A message on North Korea and Russia is also expected in his UN speech. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol is looking to strengthen South Korea's status as a globally contributing country while making his biggest push yet for Busan's bid to host the World Expo in 2030. On Wednesday, the presidential office announced that President Yoon will be in New York from Monday to Friday.
During this general meeting, the president will launch an all-out diplomatic campaign to get support for Busan's bid to host the World Expo in 2030. At the moment, around 30 meetings with other leaders are scheduled, with more in the works. This is something that no other South Korean president has attempted during overseas trips.
As soon as he lands in New York, President Yoon will start his series of bilateral meetings with the leaders of Turkmenistan and the Czech Republic, among others. On the second day, he will meet with his Ghanaian counterpart as well as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. A number of bilateral sideline meetings will happen in between, including with 10 countries that South Korea never has met before one-on-one, such as San Marino and St. Lucia. The third day will be when Yoon speaks to the UN General Assembly.
President Yoon will promise to the world continued enhancement of official development assistance to close the global development gaps, support to reduce carbon emissions and the transition to clean energy in climate-vulnerable countries, and for South Korea to be responsible for the world enjoying the benefits of digital technology.
Kim also explained that Yoon will have the opportunity to share South Korea's vision as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 2 years starting in 2024. On Thursday, he will be returning to New York University's Digital Vision Forum, as last year he was there to emphasize the importance of digital technologies in contributing to the expansion of freedom. He is expected to re-emphasize South Korea's taking the lead in creating regulations for fair and equitable access to digital assets. On his last day, he will wrap up his stay in New York with meetings with the leaders of the Pacific Islands. While the top office's focus may be on winning votes at BIE for Busan's bid to host World Expo 2030, it does come with the backdrop of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un visiting Russia's Vladimir Putin, with the two strengthening military cooperation. An official says the public can expect an appropriate analysis and message for the two in Yoon's speech to the UN General Assembly. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The UNESCO World Heritage Committee has called on Japan to fulfill its commitments to inform the public of the accurate history behind Hashima Island in Japan, where the forced labor of Korean people and others took place from early to mid-1900s. The committee at its 45th session held in Riyadh adopted a decision by consensus on Thursday, encouraging Tokyo to continue dialogue with concerned states, conduct further research and collect data, including new testimonies to enhance, quote, the interpretation strategy of the site. The strategy refers to the promises made by Japan in 2015 to tell the whole history behind Hashima Island upon its approval as a heritage site. Japan has since been criticized for whitewashing the history of the coal mining island known as Gunam-do in Korean due to its resemblance to a battleship. Seoul's Foreign Ministry on Thursday announced it expects Tokyo to carry out its promises and to report such progress by December 2024, as requested by UNESCO. Over in eastern Libya, the death toll from the devastating flooding has risen to over 11,000. The rival governments are seeking cooperation for humanitarian relief as help is pouring in from the international community. Our Choi Soo-young has the latest.
The death toll from floods in the Libyan city of Derna has soared to 11,300. That's according to the Libyan Red Crescent on Thursday. Rescue efforts are ongoing following the catastrophic dam collapse on September 10th following heavy rain. The number of confirmed deaths is increasing rapidly, and the final death toll could potentially reach up to 20,000 people. Thousands of dead bodies have been buried in mass graves. Scientists say the latest extreme weather event, Storm Daniel, the Mediterranean storm that poured torrential rain on the Libyan coast, shows some of the hallmarks of climate change.
The Libyan situation is obviously catastrophic and a very difficult situation. And with all these events, it's always complicated. The ultimate trigger for it is an extreme storm in the Mediterranean that many are linking to global warming.
Since 2014, Libya has been divided into two rival governments. The government of national unity in the west is recognized by the United Nations, while the Libyan National Army under the military leadership controls the east, where the coastal city of Derna is located. According to BBC reports, these opposing governments, after a long conflict, are now seeking cooperation for humanitarian relief. Libya's Eastern administration approved an emergency budget of 10 billion Libyan dinars, nearly $2 billion on Thursday, to help flood-affected areas.
Today we met regarding the emergency budget for the purpose of voting on it and for the purpose of determining the mechanisms for its distribution and to ensure that the budget will achieve what is required of it or will achieve the purpose of its allocation, which is to help the population rebuild and repair roads and bridges.
Meanwhile, in response, the World Health Organization announced that it would give $2 million from its emergency fund to help the flood victims. The WHO also sent extra emergency supplies and medical supplies from its logistics hub in Dubai. The United Nations, EU, and countries like the UK, Tunisia, and Jordan are among those who have also joined the aid effort. Derna, a small city of around 125,000 people, might have lost 1 in 6 residents if the estimated disaster numbers are accurate. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
As the nation looks to close the gap between the Seoul metropolitan area and regions outside it, President Yoon launched a new committee aiming for policies to decentralize authority and promote balanced growth nationwide. Oh Soo-young reports.
South Korea will establish new locally driven special zones throughout the country, offering more attractions for firms and younger workers to narrow the gap between the capital area and the country's regional economies. On Thursday, at the southern port city of Busan, President Yoon Suk-yeol announced the launch of the Presidential Committee for Decentralization and Balanced Development. The gap between regional economies and the country's metropolitan area, comprising Seoul, Incheon and Gyeonggi-do province, has been widening significantly over the past 10 years, to 5.6 percentage points in 2021. To build a basis for bustling ecosystems across the nation, local governments will be able to establish 4 types of special development zones with greater autonomy to initiate distinctive policies, compared to previous special economic zones that were driven by the central government.
저는 지역 균형 발전의 핵심으로 공정한 접근성, 지역의 재정 자주권 강화, 지역 스스로 발굴한 비교 우위 산업에 대한 중앙정부의 지원을 강조해 왔습니다. 그리고 저는 교육이 지역 발전의 핵심이라고 역설해 왔습니다.
Thus, so-called opportunity development zones will offer various tax incentives on corporate activities, including the deferral of acquisition and property taxes for firms that relocate to the area, and 5-year waivers on income and corporate taxes for new businesses. To encourage local innovation, particularly in 6 advanced tech areas like semiconductors, bio and robotics, low-interest loan schemes and tax benefits for investors will be prepared, as well as fast-track regulatory checks, exemptions and approvals. In order to encourage relocation, private housing supplies and transfer tax benefits for property will be provided for employees of the incoming firms, along with childcare and new schools. To foster future innovation, special education zones will enable more diversity in the classroom, boosting public and online education. Universities will have more autonomy to collaborate with local governments and industries to create specialised programmes and recruit more international students. Also, city centre convergence zones aim to attract young people to 5 metropolitan cities throughout the country, with clusters of cultural, residential and commercial spaces. Nearly 9 in 10 of Korea's largest companies are located in the capital region, where over 50% of the population live and work. Meanwhile, special cultural zones aim to foster the growth of designated cultural cities. The government aims to push through relevant legislature in time to launch the new special zones from 2024. Oosyoung, Arirang News.
After seeing some signs of inflation cooling down at the beginning of the year, South Korea is once again seeing price pressures picking up, led by surging global oil prices. An Sung-jin explains.
Despite a relative slowdown this year, consumer prices in South Korea remain unstable amid continuing external uncertainties. According to economics think tank, the Korea Development Institute on Friday, consumer prices in August saw an on-year increase of 3.4%. This indicates improvement from January of this year when the on-year increase was 5.2%. Though the inflation rate has been dropping on a monthly comparison, the rise in prices for energy and agricultural products has pushed last month's figure back up from 2.3% in July. Weather conditions such as heat waves and heavy rain largely attributed to the 2.7% on-year increase for agricultural products, particularly the increased cost of vegetables. Oil prices rose as Russia and Saudi Arabia extended their oil production cuts through the end of this year, while expectations that there will be no further interest rate hikes in the U.S. through the end of 2023 also attributed to climbing oil prices. These factors took their toll on domestic oil prices, which jumped 11% on-year. Prices for basic necessities, including vegetables, processed food, and petroleum products, were also affected, increasing 3.9% on-year. Despite global volatile factors that affect consumer prices, the inflation increases are expected to further slow down, as improvement in consumer sentiment and semiconductor exports provides some optimism. Han Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Oil prices rose to their highest level this year on Thursday amid supply concerns due to extended output cuts by Saudi Arabia and Russia. Brent and U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude oil, the benchmark for oil prices in the United States, jumped past the $90 US dollar mark, hitting peaks not seen since November last year. This follows an International Energy Agency report on Wednesday forecasting a market deficit until the end of the year due to production cuts from Saudi Arabia and Russia. Meanwhile, August U.S. producer price index showed the biggest on-month rise since June last year due to oil price hikes. The South Korean government has issued an influenza alert starting from Friday due to this year's unusually long flu season, which continued into late August. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, the number of flu cases hit 11.3 per 1,000 people in the first week of September. That is almost double the expected average for that period. The national influenza vaccination program will begin on September 20th for children who require 2 doses, followed by children and pregnant women on the 5th of October. Elderly people can receive their shots from October 11th. The previous alert was issued in September 2022, and this is the first time that such an alert has been issued without previous one being lifted. The number of babies born in South Korea is continuously sinking to new lows, but there's one county that's bucking the trend and seeing the fertility rate go up. Our Lee Soo-jin goes there to find the secret and what that implies for the country.
Baby whales and classroom chatter might soon be a thing of the past. This elementary school is just one of many in South Korea that have been abandoned and shut down due to the lack of students. And this comes as South Korea's fertility rate continues to shatter records. The nation's total fertility rate, the average number of children expected per woman, tumbled to a record low of 0.78 last year. As of 2021, South Korea is the only OECD member country where the total fertility rate is less than 1. And this year's fertility rate for the second quarter fell further to 0.7. We asked young South Koreans why they're hesitant to have children.
If I get married, both me and my husband will probably have to work because of the high education costs. But if there's no childcare center that I can trust, it might be better to just not have children.
The reality is that raising a kid is costly because of the high education costs.
But there are still areas in South Korea where fertility rates have actually gone up. This county in Gangwon-do province has a fertility rate that greatly exceeds the national average. Let's go find out how it has achieved this. We met with the mayor of Hwachang-gun County, who told us that this was largely due to a decade-long effort to provide a comprehensive support system with a focus on alleviating the education cost burden.
We wanted to provide equal opportunities for people regardless of their economic background, from the time the baby is in their mother's womb until the child graduates college.
The county pays college tuitions of not only students attending domestic colleges, but also any of the world's top 100 universities, as long as they have parents who have lived in Hwachang for at least 3 years. While the nation's fertility rate has been on a steady decline since 2015, Hwachang's fertility rate actually rose from 1.2 in 2021 to 1.4 last year. During this period, a new public postpartum rest center opened. Postpartum rest centers are clinics unique to Korean culture that help mothers recuperate after giving birth. Women typically stay at these centers for 2 weeks where staff care for newborns while the mothers rest. They can cost up to around $12,000.
Anyone who's lived in Hwachang for at least a year can use the center for 2 weeks at no cost. I've lived here for 3 years, so I'm staying here for free.
There are also programs aimed at helping them transition into motherhood smoothly.
The programs that teach us practical skills such as how to bathe a newborn and breastfeed properly have been super helpful.
The county also offers services where elementary school students can hail a bus through a smartphone app.
주로 오는데 얼마 정도 걸려요?
2분.
The bus stops at various locations and parents receive text messages that inform them of their child's location. The importance of coming up with a comprehensive solution like this was echoed by one expert.
The government has already implemented various policies, including financial incentives for having children, improving work-life balance, and expanding childcare services. Yet to be effective, policies must take a comprehensive approach.
She added that there also needs to be more measures aimed at providing affordable housing and stable jobs, as well as creating a cultural shift away from the traditional nuclear family structure. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Russia is in desperate need of military supplies for its war in Ukraine, and North Korea may be its best option as it is overloaded with self-propelled artillery and anti-tank missiles, all the basic weapons Russia wants the most. Though produced in the 80s and 90s, the conventional weapons don't get outdated quickly. Plus, Russia can receive them fast using its railway. Most importantly, North Korea's weapons are based on the former Soviet Union's weapon systems, so they can be put to use in Ukraine right away. Well, speculation over an arms deal already existed when North Korea's missiles seized by Ukrainian forces. Now there are concerns on a possible deal expanding such arms transfers. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.